The year is 1688. The Caribbean sun, usually a comforting warmth, beat down with a relentless fury on the deck of the Serpent's Kiss, baking the weathered planks and making the very air shimmer. Captain Elias Thorne, a man whose face was as craggy as the cliffs of Tortuga and whose eyes held the glint of ancient gold, surveyed his crew. They were a motley bunch, hardened men and women, each with a story etched into their skin by sun, salt, and steel. Elias, however, was preoccupied. His gaze, often sharp and calculating, was now softened with a tenderness reserved for one person, Isabella. Isabella, his beloved, a woman whose spirit was as untamed as the sea itself, was not on his ship. She was back on the bustling, sun-drenched docks of Port Royal, making final arrangements for their long-awaited journey. They were to sail away, leaving the cutthroat life of piracy behind, to a small, secluded island Elias had painstakingly acquired, a place where their love could flourish in peace. The anticipation of their new life, free from the constant threat of the Royal Navy and the endless pursuit of treasure, filled Elias with a hope he hadn't known possible. A sudden squall, however, tore through the azure sky, a monstrous beast of wind and rain that descended upon Port Royal with the speed of a striking viper. The Serpent's Kiss, anchored just beyond the harbour, was tossed about like a toy. Elias fought the wheel, his muscles straining against the tempest, his heart a frantic drumbeat in his chest. "Hold fast, lads!" he bellowed, his voice barely audible above the howling wind and crashing waves. "To the rigging! Secure the mainmast!" Days later, when the storm finally relented, leaving a trail of shattered ships and broken dreams in its wake, Elias returned to a devastated Port Royal. The vibrant port he knew was now a scene of utter chaos. Masts jutted from the water at unnatural angles, houses were reduced to splinters, and the air hung heavy with the smell of brine and despair. He searched frantically, his hope dwindling with each passing moment, calling Isabella's name until his throat was raw. He found her eventually not amongst the dead, but in a state that made his blood run cold. She was there, on the docks, amidst the wreckage, but she was not alone. Her parents, devout and rigid landowners who had always despised Elias's pirate life, stood over her. But it wasn't just them. A large, jeering crowd had gathered, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and righteous condemnation. Isabella, the woman who had faced down naval officers with a defiant glare, who had laughed in the face of danger, was now stripped bare, exposed to the harsh gaze of the crowd. Her clothes, torn and soiled, lay at her feet. Her face, usually alight with fierce joy, was streaked with tears and shame, her eyes fixed on the ground, mirroring the broken state of her spirit. Elias's world shattered. He saw the cruelty in her parents' eyes, the self-serving piety that masked their true intentions. They were using the devastation of the storm, the chaos and despair, as an opportunity to publicly disgrace Isabella, to sever her ties with him forever, to punish her for daring to love a pirate. "She is a harlot!" her mother shrieked, her voice cutting through the mournful cries of the gulls. "A disgrace to her family, a paramour of a demon." Rage, cold and pure, unlike anything he had ever known, surged through Elias. He moved, a blur of motion, pushing through the stunned crowd. His hand went to the pistol at his hip, but a swift, analytical part of his mind knew that open confrontation would only endanger Isabella further. He wouldn't give her parents the satisfaction of seeing him fall into their trap. He reached her, his body shielding her from the leering eyes. He threw his own coat around her shivering form, its heavy wool a small comfort against the biting wind and the weight of public humiliation. "Touch her again," Elias growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that sent shivers through the crowd, "and you'll face the wrath of every pirate who sails these seas." His eyes, normally full of mischief, were now devoid of humor, replaced by a terrifying intensity that promised swift and brutal retribution. He scooped Isabella into his arms, her body trembling, and carried her through the stunned silence of the crowd. They parted for him, unwilling to challenge the fury in his gaze. He walked with a determined stride, Isabella clutched protectively against his chest, her head buried in his shoulder, away from the judgmental eyes. He returned to the Serpent's Kiss, his crew, witnessing the scene from the ship, now a silent, grim phalanx. They knew Elias, knew his temper, and knew the depth of his love for Isabella. They watched as he carried her below deck, leaving the remnants of the storm and the shattered reputation of Port Royal behind. The incident solidified a new resolve in Elias. His dream of a peaceful life with Isabella was gone, replaced by a burning desire for revenge against those who had dared to harm her, and a commitment to rebuild her spirit, to remind her of the fearless woman she truly was. He would make them pay, and Isabella would be his co-captain, his equal, his queen. "She sails with me now," he whispered, a solemn vow to the woman in his arms and to the unforgiving sea. The days that followed were a blur of pain and healing. Isabella remained cloistered in Elias's cabin, the shame of the public humiliation a heavy shroud around her. Elias, with the patience of a seasoned sailor navigating treacherous waters, tended to her, not just physically but emotionally. He spoke softly, recounting tales of their past adventures, reminding her of her courage, her quick wit, her unwavering spirit. He would sit by her side, holding her hand, his presence a silent anchor in her stormy mind. "They cannot break you, my love," he whispered one evening, the ship swaying gently beneath them. "They merely expose their own ugliness. You are stronger than any judgment, fiercer than any storm." Gradually, like a ship slowly finding its bearings after a gale, Isabella began to emerge from her shell. Her initial silence gave way to soft murmurs, then to hesitant conversations. She would listen as Elias recounted his plans, his voice filled with a new, sharper edge. His dream of a peaceful life had been replaced by a burning desire for retribution against her parents, who had not only shamed her, but had also stolen her family's considerable fortune, accusing Elias of witchcraft and manipulation to justify their actions. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the cabin's porthole, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, Isabella spoke with a newfound clarity. "They took everything, Elias. Not just my dignity, but our future. They seized my inheritance, all under the guise of saving my soul." Elias clenched his fist. "They will regret it. Every coin will be reclaimed." But Isabella shook her head. "No, not just the coins. They took my pride, my voice, and I want it back." Her eyes, once shadowed with pain, now held a spark, a rekindled fire that Elias recognized with a surge of relief. "Teach me, Elias. Teach me to command, to fight, to be the Serpent's Kiss's true co-captain." And so Elias did. He spent hours on deck, under the relentless Caribbean sun, teaching her the intricacies of navigation, the art of sword fighting, the precision of firing a musket. He showed her how to read the winds, how to tie complex knots, how to bark orders with authority. The crew, initially wary of her presence, soon witnessed her transformation. They saw her dedication, her fierce intelligence, and her unwavering determination. One day, during a training session with a cutlass, Isabella disarmed Elias with a swift, unexpected move. "Impressive, my pirate queen," he said, a proud smile gracing his lips. Isabella, breathing heavily, met his gaze, a smirk playing on her lips. "I learn from the best, Captain." Her first true test came during a skirmish with a Spanish galleon laden with gold and spices. Elias, feigning an injury during the heat of battle, watched from the main deck as Isabella, her face smudged with gunpowder and her eyes blazing, took command. She moved with a grace that belied her newfound ferocity, her commands cutting through the roar of cannons and the clash of steel. She rallied the crew, strategized on the fly, and led the charge onto the galleon's deck with a blood-curdling scream. "For the Serpent's kiss!" she cried, her cutlass flashing in the sun, deflecting a blow, then striking down a Spanish soldier with practiced ease. Her hair, usually neatly braided, had come undone, flying wildly around her face, making her look like a warrior goddess. The crew, electrified by her leadership, fought with renewed vigor. The galleon was taken, its riches secured, and the Spanish crew subdued. When Isabella returned to the Serpent's Kiss, triumphant and exhilarated, the crew cheered, their voices echoing across the waves. Elias met her at the gangplank, a profound admiration in his eyes. He took her hand, brought it to his lips, and kissed it with reverence. "You led them brilliantly, Isabella. You are more than a co-captain. You are their pirate queen." From that day forward, Isabella's authority was undisputed. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Elias, a formidable force, her reputation spreading like wildfire across the Caribbean. They raided merchant ships, outsmarted naval patrols, and always, their eyes were on Port Royal. Isabella's parents, safe in their illusion of power, were oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon, a storm that bore the name of their disgraced daughter. Elias knew that the time for their final confrontation was drawing near. He would ensure that Isabella not only reclaimed what was hers, but also rose above the very people who sought to destroy her. Her reign as the pirate queen was only just beginning. The winds of retribution finally brought the Serpent's Kiss back to Port Royal. There was no storm now, just a chilling silence that preceded a hurricane. Word of the pirate queen, Isabella, had reached her parents, who dismissed it as rumor until the audacious raids near Port Royal became undeniable. On a moonlit night, the Serpent's Kiss slipped into the harbor. Elias and Isabella stood on the quarterdeck, ready. They led a landing party to her parents' estate, finding them celebrating, unaware of the reckoning at their door. The doors burst open. Elias, full of cold fury, stood beside a calm, composed Isabella. "Mother! Father!" she said, her voice steady. "We have much to discuss." Her parents were horrified. "Isabella, you're with this brute!" her mother shrieked. "I am his co-captain," Isabella corrected. "I am here to reclaim what you stole, my inheritance, my dignity, and my future." Her father blustered, but Isabella silenced him. "You tried to break me. You only made me stronger." She presented damning evidence of their illegal acts, exposing their greed and hypocrisy. Cornered, they crumbled. Isabella, with calm authority, laid out her terms: the return of her full inheritance, a public confession of their wrongdoing, and a substantial donation to the storm victims. The next morning, Isabella and Elias stood on deck, watching the sun rise. Her mission was complete. Her parents were humiliated and powerless. "We could have taken more," she said thoughtfully. Elias smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "We fight for justice, my pirate queen, not just for greed." She leaned into him, a sense of peace washing over her. She was no longer just the disgraced daughter. She was Isabella Thorne, the pirate queen. "So, what's next, Captain?" she asked, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Elias looked at the horizon, a new dream forming. "The world is our oyster, my love. We sail wherever the wind takes us, together, always." They became legends, champions of the wronged. Isabella, once stripped of her dignity, had not only reclaimed it, but had risen to become a symbol of defiance and strength, forever sailing beside the man who saw her true worth. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this epic tale of romance, revenge, and resilience, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories from the high seas.